Hey, everybody.
Good morning.
This is November 18th, 2020, and this is episode 122 of Transmission.
And good morning, Kathleen. I'm wondering how your toe is doing.
What's up with her toe?
She hurt her toe. Yeah.
That's right.
So anyway, just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here we are. I a couple weeks back, I posted, and I don't know, maybe this like dates me or just nobody's interested in existentialist writing because hardly anybody replied. I was
Okay.
like, okay, what is this time period? Is this more Waiting for Godot or The Castle? like which one are we in?
That takes a high degree of literacy and cultural sophistication to be able to engage. I mean, I don't know if I've read both of those. I know what they are.
Okay. Well,
How do you answer?
well, there's some days that I feel like it's one, and some days that I feel like it's the other. So for those of you who have not read these things, so The Castle is Kathleen says I have to stay off my feet another 3 or 4 weeks. I think that's weeks. She said works, but doing okay. Okay, well that's a long time.
Unless instead of like her toe is being punished by one of the Greek gods, and she has to commit 3 or 4 feats before they heal.
Oh, that would be that would be good.
That's what my brain goes to when I hear having to complete works in order to find healing.
Yes. Yes, but we're saved by grace and not by works. So
filthy Protestant.
Anyway, so The Castle is a very long book by Franz Kafka.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about this guy who is trying to get his case adjudicated, and he's got to get to the castle to lodge his complaint with the king.
Mm-hmm.
And it's snowing like all the time, and the snow is just getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And basically, he never gets to the castle. Or once he gets to the castle, then there's all these bureaucratic rooms that he has to go through. And so it's it's an allegory on bureaucracy and general hopelessness and that sort of thing. So there's that.
Relatable.
And then there's Waiting for Godot, which is a play,
mm-hmm.
and is is sort of is also an existential work. These two people that are waiting for this guy named Godot, who is supposed to come and give them a message, and he never shows up. And there's a sense that he's never going to show up, but he's almost going to show up, but he never shows up. And so basically, it's just these guys kind of standing there talking while they're waiting.
I feel like that mashup describes our posture towards the future. I also think the present I would describe as a mashup of the Grand Inquisitor chapter from the Brothers Karamazov and Metamorphosis. So we started 2020 kind of as a normal person, and this 2020 has slowly turned into an insect that's losing its sense of humanity.
Right.
But then the Grand Inquisitor chapter is the story told in the Brothers Karamazov about how Jesus comes back and meets the Grand Inquisitor, and the Grand Inquisitor says, "We don't need you anymore," and betrays him with a kiss. And it's a perfect example of the church's role in being complicit with Trump's rise. So all we need is some people to suggest the past with existentialist return. We could have all of time covered.
There we go.
If there's a time to read existentialism, it may be this time. If you're
it is now
from becoming more suicidal. Like if you're prone to suicidal or deep depression, maybe don't. But otherwise, it's a time where it all makes sense.
Yeah. So I kind of just feel like that. Yeah, and I love Metamorphosis is great. The guy turns into this giant bug. He's lying in bed, and it's sort of like a centipede bug. and then he just falls apart and dies. Like
yeah,
that's
kind of what my years felt like. So
yeah, so here we are. We had this election, like there was all this energy, everything was built up to that. We had the election, we have the results. And by the way, we do have the results. So this is one thing, I'm giving zero quarter to any of this bullshit of, there's some question about the results. There's no question about the results.
no.
I see all my nice liberal friends going, oh, well, let's just ask, what would it take you to accept the election? And actually, a friend of mine got pissed off at me and deleted my post on his post to that. And it's just like, let's try to talk to the lunatics. And it's like, no, I'm not doing that. There is no question about this. There's been no fraud. There's no close call. It's not like the election of 2000.
People making that comparison are foolish, and people making the comparison to the Russian stuff from 2016, like I'm not into the Russian stuff. Like I never felt upset at the Russians at all during any of that time, but these comparisons are not apt.
Yeah, and it's just that Overton window thing that we've talked about, where it's like you keep moving the level of crazy, and then you start accepting things that are completely ridiculous and stupid. So there's no question about who won. So Biden's won. Trump is, engaging in this psychotic level hissy fit, which all the Republicans are going along with. And so now we're just sort of waiting, and I get up every morning and I get on the news. I'm like, okay, what crazy thing did he do overnight? Like what stupid person is not believing that we're going to have a new administration? And then you get all these people that are like, we're going to have a new administration. We just have to kind of wait for something, And so, so it's like we're slogging through the snow, trying to get to the castle. And it's a very weird state of suspended animation. And then there's the illness, right? So it's like the bug thing, like a leg fell off this morning. Part of my scales are falling off now. I get a couple phone calls or emails, like 5 more people I know have COVID. Somebody else in the hospital. It's been some other funeral super spreader event. And so, we're in this very strange state of suspended animation.
Yeah, and it's fascinating that the feeling you're describing of someone who's like, we just need to curry favor with the Republicans and woo them to our side. Like, there's something about that. I've seen a lot of posts about empathy, how what we need now as a society is more empathy, which I don't disagree with that. But what they mean by that, I think, in this context, saying we need more empathy towards Republicans is really an enablement statement. You don't legitimize this response to the election. And that's what happens but to me, that's similar. That's a similar vibe to how I hear a lot of people talking about hope as this very impotent, passive thing where you're like, oh, I guess we're going to sit around and hope things work out for the best, which isn't an Advent hope, if we're going to get theological that way. And it's also not the hope it's not a very revolutionary hope. To me, hope is a very disruptive and violent thing if you do it right. It's this expectation that even though things don't look good, by God, we can not only hope for, but in our hope demand that things get better. That's hope.
Yeah.
That's the hope I want. I don't want to turn into a giant insect. I want to stay human. Damn it.
Right. Yeah, and and then at the same time I've pitched this book a few times, but I can't pitch it enough, honestly.
Yeah, that's
right.
This
is nonviolent stuff will get you killed.
This definitely your most referenced book, and by now.
Yeah. I've decided that there needs to be a boot camp for white people based on this book. Like where white people are just forced to. It's like in Clockwork Orange, where your eyelids are open, and you have to and you have to read this book as a white person and actually ingest what is happening, because you page after page after page, story after story of white people. And again, this isn't in 1780, right?
Mhm.
This is in 1946, 1950, right? I mean, these people are all still alive, or a lot of them. These are people's parents or grandparents if you're really young. And it's like they rode into town and they killed all the black people in this neighborhood, or they burned down these black people's stores, or they dragged this guy through the street. And I think that this whole thing of let's just be nice and empathetic to folks has been the standard white response. Right. And in the book, right, the black people who are in these communities. So basically, a lot of what the book is talking about is what is the role of guns in the civil rights movement,
Mm-hmm.
and what is the role of disruption in the civil rights movement. And so, these civil rights activists come from outside of these communities, and they say, hey, we got to organize. We got to organize for the vote. We've got to organize for rights. We've got to organize, for political change. And, oh, by the way, we've got this cool nonviolent thing. And the black people in the community are like, well, that's great. You've got this nonviolent thing. I've got a gun. Because the white people who just cruise through here, right? So the KKK, they all jump in their cars with their guns, and they cruise through town and they shoot up houses. And the black people are like, we cannot have more empathy for these white people. That's not the thing that's going to work here. And so, yeah, I mean, that hope that is really powerful has got to be a hope that stands up to the craziness and the violence and the racism. And that's the hope that's going to get us somewhere. And so then when you're in this state of suspended animation, I mean, I also feel like our spiritual lives and practice is the other thing that continues to give us strength to mobilize against this really demonic possession that's going on.
One of my favorite books that I often reference is Hope in Time of Abandonment by Jacques Ellul. And the reason I like that, especially during Advent, is he says, hope is blasphemous. Because when you experience the silence of God, which is what the predominant experience of our relationship with God is,
mm-hmm.
It's shaking heaven and demanding God make good on God's promises. So there's a violence to
mm-hmm.
it. And so to me, spiritually, that's kind of the hope we should have. And then politically, it's not like, well, let's see what Biden does. Hope it's better. It's like, no, you have to insist and make him afraid of not making it better. The fear can be, we don't have to take to the Capitol with guns. There's all kinds of ways you can inspire fear in our political leaders, like fear of not getting reelected, fear of having a shamed legacy. There's all kinds of things. So I'm not saying let's just start. We don't have to go full Bolshevism here, but still, this sort of passive hope is foreign to the way hope is presented in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And we have to ask, where did our hope come from?
Yeah. And to be very clear about what's going on in this book, none of the people with guns in this book are advocating using the guns on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's all about defense. It's all about protecting, mm-hmm. right, the space.
Yep.
Right? It's all about that you have to have enough oomph, right? Enough spiritual energy, enough blasphemy, enough guts to defend a space for something better. And, as soon as we go, oh, let's just go back to being all nice and mushy and singing kumbaya together, that you've collapsed that space. It doesn't exist anymore.
I like the way
So people have
put it. I'm fresh out of empathy, but got a whole lot of accountability. And I think that's what people are afraid of. Like, this is what is lost when we talk just about empathy, is people need to be held accountable for their actions. If we don't, the extent to which we don't hold people to the accountable for their actions is the extent to which we enable them to kind of not only do the same crap again, but do it worse. That's what the Overton window is about.
Right.
So like this idea, like I've read articles like, well, if Trump does get indicted, what Biden needs to do is
pardon him
for the healing invitation. I'm like, that's not what healing looks like. Healing is revolutionary. Healing comes by holding people to account so that people who have been crushed and oppressed know that they can step forward instead of being pushed back. It's just white middle classness is a toxic pathology. We need to shake ourselves out of it. We're not helping anything by telling everyone to just calm down and just wait. It'll be better. The arc of the universe bends towards justice. It'll all work out somehow. Dr. King said that. So like that that's not what he was talking about.
No, so it's good. People have gotten through their existentialist reading, and they're now ready to comment. So the comments are pouring in. It's good.
Yeah. Kathleen writes, I keep thinking about my grandfather from the Arkansas Ozarks. He fondly remembered lynchings of black men. God, Kathleen, you have the best and worst stories. Remembering of lynchings of black men, yet he read his Bible every day and appeared to be a nice guy. Most of the people I've known who have been the most entrenched in toxic ideologies have been incredibly nice people to me.
Yeah.
This is another thing. Like, we got to stop equating those two things, just like you're pointing out wonderfully in that anecdote.
Yeah, no, exactly. And and again, this pathological notion of empathy, allows whiteness. And this is what has allowed Trump and all these people to rise and to get away with all this stuff. And it's not any kind of, there is no spiritual tradition that talks about not holding people accountable. None. Right? I mean, and the mechanism for that accountability is different in different traditions, but every single tradition talks about the need to hold people accountable for injustice.
It's so funny to me, and maybe this has always been this way, but it seems different. But just the way that words get twisted. Like, so if you say, well, Trump is trying to fight a legally held election, people say, well, you hate the president. And so they'll try to spin any sort of criticism as some sort of like offensive hatred. And so there's this sort of spinning that happens. And what it does is then it makes it's pushing the liberal button saying, no, I don't hate him. Actually, I don't want anything bad to happen. I want healing for our nation. I feel like we're being gamed. This is how abusers do this all the time. Like they push you into passivity. It's like why the white slave owners wanted to introduce Christianity, is they thought it would help them be docile.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have a spirituality that encourages passivity and docility, or like spiritual bypassing or any of that stuff, you need to just say, maybe this is a crap spirituality and I need to move on.
Right.
I mean, we talked about this, especially early on, about, I forget the word. What's it called when you're basically detached from yourself?
Dissociation,
the spirituality of dissociation. We haven't talked about that for a while, but that's kind of this is all symptoms of that same kind of pathology. Right. Rex writes, Deacons for Defense was a powerful group.
One of many. And
Medina writes, when I first saw that quote about hope is blasphemous, it blew my mind. Still chewing on it. Yeah, I mean, God can take it. I think we are told and taught that God doesn't want us to argue because the ultimate good is obedience, and that is not the sense you get from Scripture at all. No. That's not the ultimate good. God can handle our complaints and our anger. disagreeing with CK.
Okay.
I have a similar experience. I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but I'm assuming everything that we've said.
Yes. Her.
Guess right. Oh, go ahead.
No, she just had the similar. One of her legs just fell off. Turned into a giant bug. I don't know if that's what it is, but I'm just making
that's
that up.
That's the same assumption. Yeah. Guess writes, as we are talking about this radical hope in an Advent context, can I recommend? There's a couple pastors, a couple hashtags, TVRASCHE and Crazy Pastor on Twitter, who lead a great liturgy each year called Unmute Yourself. A couple years ago, they called it Fuck This Shit. I approve.
Sounds good.
Medina writes, those sound like my kind of people. Yeah. I think we could also go on I could also go on a detour about cursing and how people, the aversion to profanity and how this ties into all this.
Oh my God.
But you don't want to get me started on that. It's like one of my little things. Yep.
Actually, that would be fun to talk about because I find that absolutely hilarious.
It's funny how many times people will say, if we're going to go there a little bit, will say to me, like, I'd love to share what you wrote, but you said a swear word in that. And I'm like, there really aren't any kids on Facebook anymore. Like,
right. Well, plus, kids swear all the time.
Yeah, my son, he's 12. He's pretty normal. All his friends swear. They just usually don't swear in front of adults. And we are like, as long as you're not being mean to someone, go ahead. But there is this sort of a sense, we have this kind of picture of what propriety looks like, and being proper and polite somehow trumps the struggle for justice for a lot of people. This is why I hate civility as a driving force. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like, okay, well, at least I can control that. Like, it's something I can moralize about that. And that lets me off the hook for having to actually confront serious immorality.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, it's too hard to disrupt the nice systems in my life, like holding my church accountable for not doing anything about injustice. But if I can hold the pastor accountable for swearing, then I can really feel righteous. I think that's what it is. It's just like this easy thing to feel righteous about.
There's also, I'm going to inject a whole bunch of classism into this, and there are exceptions to this, but people tend to equate vulgarity with being uncouth and low class.
Yeah.
And proper speech with being upper class, and then we moralize that. And this is the thing. This is why Dungeons and Dragons is helpful to people, because they have this nice little chart.
Whoa,
lawful good. No, because they have this.
Where did that come from?
If you create a character. No, I think this is a helpful idea for some people to wrap their brain around. When you create a character, you have to choose your alignment. So, are you lawful good, neutral good? Like all these sorts of things. And so they have a category called lawful evil and chaotic good. So chaotic good would be the guy who's like cursing a lot and seems really like uncouth and vulgar, but will give coins to the homeless or whatever, like does the right thing. And then lawful evil is Hannibal Lecter, who thinks swearing is just disgusting and you should die. Like, so we need to break our thinking of equating morality with civility, which, we could talk about all day. Kathleen writes, this Sunday is Christ the King Sunday. In my sermon online, I will be talking about the parable of separating the sheep from the goats, a parable of accountability. That's a very uncomfortable passage of scripture.
Yeah. People don't like that.
People don't like it. And it has everything to do with...
I don't know why. I think it's great.
It's one of the best stories.
Yeah, but somebody said to me about that, like, oh, I don't like preaching about that because I need to be nice to everybody. And that's the problem.
Catherine writes, I also think that empathy versus accountability is a false dichotomy. I think it is. It's true.
Yes.
Created by our carceral culture in which people are either seen as pure, virtuous victims, heroes, or totally evil fucks deserving of inhumane punishment. Empathetic accountability is possible. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the point of the gospel.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Wait a minute. We'd like to talk about your comment, Catherine, but you swore. So I don't know that we can talk about it. All right. Just go ahead, Mark.
Thank you for that. This is the thing. Another thing we need to really wrap our minds around better in the Christian community, that it's good. The rich young ruler being asked to give everything to the poor was the good news. That was the gospel. That wasn't, oh, you're shitty and you need to be punished first before you can get good. It's like, no, you divesting is you moving towards greater life. And so we often think that somehow saying the hard word is being mean, and we avoid it, and we think it's because we're being good, but actually we're not being good. We're not actually thinking about their best, because we're holding from them powerful truth that could cause them not only to be held accountable, but can help them change. That's what accountability does. It's when you withhold accountability, it isn't you being kind, it's you being unkind towards everyone involved.
Yeah, I was going to say, and not just towards an individual, but towards an entire community, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's, just as taking one of many examples, right? I mean, all of the abusive behavior by clergy within church systems, ignoring that is not just about, being nice to the individual clergy folks, but, not doing that destroys the whole community. We've seen that over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And so we, and the other thing is, because we have such a vengeance-oriented approach to reality, right? We see accountability as the same thing as vengeance. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like, I am going to hold you to account. I'm going to smite you, And again, this is not what this is at all. This is about truth telling for the purpose of justice. And yeah, that's good news, right? So this continual pretense that's going on right now, that what is happening in our country is somehow some kind of, legal, acceptable, nice, valid approach to dealing with our elections. It's like, fuck that. That is not what it is at all. Mm-hmm. And we need to be very, very clear about that.
I like that Catherine pointed out the carceral culture, which for those, carceral mm-hmm. is a way of saying like the entire quote unquote justice system, which is the reason people don't like the word justice system, because it's not very just. So we'll call it the carceral system. Now, if we don't know how to think about justice in our society overall without it being punitive, which is part of the problems when we read the scriptures, because justice is not predominantly punitive. It's a restoration of the community in its full sense by addressing the things that cause harm to the community. And so we can't conceive of that because our whole society is based on punishing the undesirable elements, to the point where we equate legality with morality. Like, I've been engaging on Nextdoor app with people who are upset about how there should be more funding to the police. And where the person said, like, well, what would you do? What would you do if someone came into your house and stole from you? Would you not call the cops? And I'm like, well, no, I wouldn't. But then we'd start talking. They're like, but it's a felony. I'm like, my problem with someone breaking into my house has nothing to do with whether or not it's a felony. It has to do with them putting me at risk and stealing my shit. Like, focusing on the violation of a law and therefore needing punishment for it is a very weirdly Protestant way of thinking about things that has become incredibly toxic. So anyways.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got the last couple comments.
I think we might almost end
marginally on time today.
Susan writes, "Ha, Mark, I love it. My kids learned to swear from me. Can't argue with the behavior, but yes, don't be mean." That's I'd rather have someone swear on me all the time and be kind to me than someone who's like really mean but civil. That's actually civil meanness is worse somehow to me. Karen writes, I say to overly righteous Christians, if you don't sin, Jesus died for nothing.
Yeah, sin boldly, right?
Yes.
That's what Luther said.
Mm-hmm. Justice is economic.
Yeah,
that's right.
All right. Well, so we've spent some time waiting, hanging out. Thanks for joining us. And Godot still isn't here. So we'll be back tomorrow to wait some more.
And we'll, I'm sure we're over the weeks to come in this Advent season, we'll touch on themes of how do we wait well? Oh, another under the wire. Tendency towards vengeance is so ingrained that restorative justice, which I don't even really know what that means, sounds like we're letting people off the hook. I was joking with my partner, sure, restorative justice for working class people, but Lindsey Graham goes in the slammer.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, we'll let that speak for itself and talk to everyone.
Yeah. See you tomorrow. Bye.